All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another exciting edition of Two Men in Black and White, an honest conversation. The quote reads, I had the perfect family. That comes from the father who recalls the moment he learned of his daughter's death last night in Washington, D.C. at an event that was being hosted by the AJC at a museum there at the Jewish Embassy. Brock, welcome. Pleasure to see you, my friend. I was really upset when I read about this story today because of the two individuals, especially the young lady, Sarah Milgram, who had dedicated her life to peace and lost it in such a violent way. I really don't want to talk about the conflict. I want to talk about these two lives that we lost. Young people. This guy had just bought a ring. And help me if I'm saying his name wrong. Yaron Lashinsky had just purchased a ring for her and was going to propose in Jerusalem. I think it was next week. And now these two fabulous young people, wrong place, wrong time, a conflict that they were working obviously to try to find a resolution for. Sarah had a degree in international relations. She was working toward peace and had dedicated her life toward that mission. And now this young lady is gone at the hands of a violent extremist. And again, it makes no sense.
And the shooter was just staking out the I think it was a Jewish History Museum, and was
Yep.
just going to shoot somebody around the
Anybody.
museum. In essence, figured he was going to kill some Jewish people because that's who would most likely be there, but it didn't have to just be a Jewish person,
Could have been
right?
anybody. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, other people go to other museums, right? That's part of being in DC, and exposing yourself to other cultures is sort of part of what you do in DC.
Exactly.
It's kind of domestic terrorism. It's domestic terrorism, right?
It is.
It's violence for a political means. It's really, we had that bombing of the pregnant, the women's health center out in California. Just, these are domestic terrorism incidents, right? These are people that are trying to send a message with their violence.
Right.
And,
So,
America's a violent country, right? And a lot of people are armed, and there's a lot of inflamed, feelings, and
right.
a lot of damaged people that are being, triggered and or encouraged to do harm.
And as you mentioned, they're very well armed. And that's the scary part. It's not very difficult. As a matter of fact, they're trying to make it easier to get your hands on weapons of war that have no business in our streets. And it just frightens me. Jewish people are targeted in their houses of worship. African Americans have endured the same fate. You'll recall Dylan Roof in the church in
Hmm.
South Carolina. And like, when is enough enough? Like, when is the violence? We keep talking about when is enough enough with the Trump administration, but this is the toxic culture that they've created, right? This rogue regime that doesn't care, that doesn't give a damn about the rule of law, that doesn't give a damn about people, children, the weakest among us, the most vulnerable, and those who would just try to make a better life for themselves. I mean, Pam Biondi had some lame ass comment about law enforcement responding immediately. Well, why wasn't law enforcement there already? Right? To have a presence at a gathering like this when you know what the climate is, especially since October 7th, which, as we earlier discussed, is what, a year and a half, almost 2 years
Yeah,
removed.
it's interesting because the anti-Semitic violence in the U.S., it really comes like from such extremes, right? It'll come from one side, which is very ultra, pro Arab, pro Gaza, sometimes just religious fanatic extremist jihadist types.
Right.
And then it'll also come from the ultra right, like the Tree of Life Synagogue, and the other violence will come from like white Americans who have just, sort of this, Nazi like doctrine of anti Semitism. So it just it's coming from two totally different methodologies, but still ends in violence and ends up, in the same place. Like, I always hate to put the blame of any one incident on any one person. Certainly in our country, Trump has created a climate of antagonism and is always riling people up because he needs that to prop him up. I
Right.
mean, I don't even want to spend our podcast going into Israeli politics, but like, I kind of I'm not going to victim blame either, because the hatred of anti-Semitism has been, for centuries, goes way, way beyond anything, any lifetimes that we're even going to touch. But like, the
Yeah.
Netanyahu government is also like the American government. It's kind of a rogue
Great.
government,
Yep.
extremely far right, extremely violent, a leader who's trying to keep himself out of prison himself, and and continues to perpetrate violence in Gaza well after January 7th, and not allowing food in, like just doing things that are just, being, in essence, criticized by the rest of the world, ex the US, because Trump's not going to criticize anyone's actions, else he'd be criticized. And that's just good. It just inflames more hatred, and it's a cycle of violence that doesn't stop until people in leadership decide that it at least try, right? Even then, we're never going to stop violence. We're human beings, we're violent animals, right? But like, unless the leadership is attempting to tamp down the flames of hatred, we're going to have violence all over the place.
Right. And when we look at the kind of leadership that we have now, there's no hope. So, but moving on to American politics, let's get right into it. House Republicans, by one vote, narrowly passed that big, ugly piece of shit bill that they're moving on to the Senate now. I guess we can expect some changes, but it's up to the Senate to try to make this thing humane. I mean, the cuts they have in here are disgusting. The things they've added. They don't want you to have to register your silencer with the
Yeah.
eight. Yeah, like what
Yeah,
the.
they jammed some shit in there that you don't have to. There won't be any more contempt from court orders, right?
Yeah,
They
why is
slipped a
that?
whole bunch of extremely MAGA government lawlessness friendly clauses underneath the absurd cuts to the poor, and of course the tax benefits for the wealthy.
Right. And what's going to happen when all these people get kicked off of Medicaid?
Mark, we talk about the violence in America.
Right.
Like, this is going to crush rural America, which is primarily white, right? We talk about all those states that have two senators and don't have many people in them, and they're mostly white and they all vote red, right? That's
Right.
like the reliably red states, right? That whole middle swath of the middle of the
Where
country
nobody
is
lives.
going to get decimated by this legislation. They're well armed. Their government is telling them that now they can go die, go fuck themselves and die, because no one's going to treat you. And so what if you don't have a doctor or a hospital within a 10-hour drive that you can afford to get to? Aren't these people going to get violent?
No.
Aren't we just going to trigger more violence in America by putting people in desperate situations?
No. But Brock, they're doing it under the cover of darkness, right? So people are
Okay.
sleeping. And then they're lying about it. They're coming right out and lying to people's faces about it. Right? We're not kicking people off of Medicaid, right? Josh Hawley said that, right? Missouri, the state of Missouri, you know how much ruralness is in the state of Missouri? I mean, come on, dude, you're right in middle America. These are the people that are going to suffer and die. Hospitals will close, right? We're doing it here in Atlanta. Governor Kemp surgically closing hospitals, ironically, some of them right in urban centers. Like we had a hospital in Atlanta closing, right? A hospital group and closing in a couple of other urban centers around the state. This is all by design, right? And it's black and brown people that'll suffer and poor white people. And they're doing it under the
I got it. It's a cover of darkness. The vote was at night, but like, I mean, there's 20 people are everyone's going to know if they care to find out what's in the bill. They're going to know. Now they're going to get lied to on Fox News, and by their MAGA reps are going to lie to them. Like, my least favorite congressman, Mike Lawler from our old district in Westchester County, who went to all his town halls, told the constituents while they were screaming and yelling at him that he would not vote for legislation that cut Medicaid,
and did it.
voted for the legislation last night, but now he's out the next day saying that these aren't Medicaid cuts,
Right.
right? So basically, like you said, he's he's going to lie and try to spin and wordsmith this and gaslight people into thinking that there aren't Medicaid cuts. But at the end of the day, people aren't going to get their health care. Maybe they won't realize it yet. It may not happen until the bill gets enacted, but there's going to be a day where they can't get their pills, their surgery, their inhaler, their insulin, you tell me what it is, and their life is going to be put in danger. And no amount of lying is going to be able to tell them that they're okay.
Right. And think about the ripple effect, Brock, because indigent care is going to go through the roof, right? Indigent care is not often talked about, right? But every now and then some Republican will scream, yeah, you got the illegals using the emergency room as their primary care physician. Okay, you wait until people can't get Medicaid and see how many people are in that emergency room asking for indigent care. Hospital groups are going to go under because they're not going to be able to afford all the care that's going to be. And believe you me, hey, an asthma attack will kill people. Okay. You can't have someone suffering under an asthma attack come in and you send them away and tell them, oh, you don't have insurance. You're going to have to go to your primary care doctor. Motherfucker, I don't have one.
Kind of what I don't understand is this bill raises the debt so much, right? $2 trillion. And that had some of the quote Freedom Caucus people like haggling over. They all ended up voting for it except two of them. But like, okay, the debt is through the roof. The marketplace is already raising the cost of borrowing for the United States because they just, Moody's downgraded U.S. debt. So the marketplace is already reacting to our actions. But since they're going to blow the deficit through the roof anyway, again, why bother with the Medicaid cuts then? You're like, what's the difference if it raises it by 2 or 2.4 trillion or 2.5 trillion? Why even go through the heartache of taking something away from anyone? Why not just push through your tax cuts? Like, I don't even understand why they're trying to have the charade of offsetting it and then having to lie about Medicaid. Why didn't they just do a fuck it strategy? We're giving money to the rich. They're going to all pour it back into our coffers and we're going to keep winning elections and stay in power. So I kind of almost don't even understand what the point of the cuts is.
Yeah. And then you talk about no tax on tips and overtime, right? What's the first thing companies are going to do? Right? Cut out overtime. No overtime, right? You're not going to be getting any overtime. If you get paid OT, you can forget about seeing it if you still have a job, right? Because that's mostly for hourly workers that get overtime pay, right? So first of all, that's going to get cut out, right? And then you talk about more spending on the military and immigration enforcement and another, $50 billion to build that wall. I thought Mexico was paying for the wall. They're not? Okay, good to know. Good to know. It's a bunch of bullshit. It's not about making our lives better. It's about enriching themselves. And you can scream and yell till you're blue in the face at the MAGA cult morons out there, and they still won't listen to fact-based arguments when it comes to governing. It goes all the way back to January 6th, right? And it goes all the way back to him coming down the escalator. They're bringing their criminals. They're bringing their rapists, their drug dealers, right? It goes all the way back to the beginning with this fucking guy. To the Central Park 5 ad he took out in the New York Times. He's a liar. He's a bullshitter. He's a con man. He's Yosemite scam on steroids. And I'm just sick of it. It's like, how did we fall for a D- student from Wharton who only got in because he had the complexion for the connection? And now we've let this guy turn over our country, shake it upside down for every nickel he can squeeze out of it. And the late night hosts are just having a joke with it. They're having a blast. Jimmy Kimmel, Colbert, they're having a blast with it. Meanwhile, we're going to start seeing people dying, right? What do you call it? Hurricane season starts on the 1st of June. Right? And the summer is just going to be ugly. It's going to be hot.
Actually, they're already, I guess, early predictions are it's going to be a higher than normal volume of hurricanes this season. We'll see if that ends up being correct with no FEMA and virtually no NOAA. But we get, I'll always be, I know MAGA at the core is getting their racism. So they're getting, quote, the America as they think it should be, right? Sweeping black and brown people. And okay, if a bunch of poor white people get swept along, even if it's them, they're okay with it. But I'll never really understand the championing of the tax cuts for the ultra wealthy. Like,
Yeah.
what exactly, like, what is in that for you? And like, why are you like rooting for these people as winners? Like, that's the one piece of the puzzle that I'll never understand. All the rest of it I can kind of intellectualize, but I can never get to that piece of it. Like, I just don't understand why someone's getting up and cheering, yeah, Bezos and Zuck, they
Right.
need more billions. My health care, don't worry about my school system. I just drove over a pothole and like, I can't get my insulin. And I didn't know that tornado was going to hit till like it was 2 seconds away. All
Right.
their lives becoming more miserable, but they're championing, even more for that ultra wealthy. I just don't understand like what emotional connection, hard, day in, day out MAGA has for just these random billionaires that they'll never meet or ever be in touch with.
They'll
But
never
that,
breathe the same air as these fucking guys.
yes,
Unless
Meanwhile, we're rolling back like caps on methane. So like, okay, now we're gonna have more cancer again, right? All these things getting rolled back. Okay, so that's that. State of the Union. That's where we're at. No surprise though. We've known since the election that the Project 2025 was going to push through a budget that looked like this, right? It's not hidden. This has been in plain sight as much as the vote was at 2 a.m. I mean, it's been in Project 25. It's been talked about. It's been hinted at. Medicare, it was going to be Medicare and Medicaid cuts. So it's just Medicaid, right? Maybe they threw Medicare out there to make it look like Medicaid cuts were just like a compromise position. So there's no surprise to this. Sadly, it's what America voted for.
right.
And now we're getting it.
Now you're getting it. And we're going to have to pay for it. And by the way, with this big, beautiful bill, as the big orange mango Mussolini calls it, he's also punishing his retribution tour continues as he punishes blue states and takes away vital services and vital funding for lots of programs like flood prevention for the blue states. And he's giving that money to red states. So, it continues with this fucking tiny tot, who's in the Oval Office, who has absolutely no business being there. And, we suffer on a whole, right? The only ones benefiting are the one percenters. And that's the problem, man. It's like, wait a minute, we're all going to suffer. Is what people don't understand. These tornadoes never ask first, is this a red or blue county before we touch down? Right? They never ask. Right. And so I think, and I mentioned this to you the other day, I think at some point, especially with no FEMA to speak of and no money allocated for it, I think we're going to see states that are going to go bankrupt trying to clean up behind these messes, trying to figure out what to do with their education system, and trying to figure out everything else, like the school lunches, reduced cost lunches. I think states are going to go under and go bankrupt because they're
Well,
not going to have the dough.
I don't think they're going to bankrupt. I just think they're going to stop delivering the services. I think kids
That
are
makes
going to go hungry. You know what? They just won't clean shit up, right? So you'll drive through some areas and they'll just be decimated buildings where they didn't have the money to clean up or rebuild. And they're just going to be, in essence, like poverty stricken regions.
right.
Because, so when something negative happens, they're just not going to have the money to fix anything. And they're going to have a populace that, is just going to die sooner. It's going to be less healthy. I mean, it's of course going to drag down the entire country. It's not just going to happen in certain pockets, right?
Right.
It's going to get to all of us. The state lines aren't, border walls, right? Like they're just lines on a highway, right? It's just a sign on a highway.
Right.
But America's in decline. What are we going to do about it? Hakeem Jeffries and his senior leadership wrote a harshly worded letter after the vote, right? But they did what they could, right? 215 of them voted no, but they don't run the House. So they were going to get steamrolled one way or another. The only recourse they had was to try to get out there in the arena of popular opinion and force some pressure, but clearly there wasn't enough pressure on the Republican reps.
Right.
Versus, two of them went there on voted no on philosophical reasons because of the debt, but the rest just fell in line. I mean,
Right.
I have no hopes the Senate's going to do much.
Me neither. Me neither. And I think this is it for us. I mean, I saw an article in the New York Times where some Ivy League professors, I believe from Yale, were talking about fascism was here and we're leaving the United States.
Yeah, they're gone. I feel like they've already left. Timothy Snyder and
Yeah.
some other woman, and they
Oh,
decided
yeah.
to go to Canada.
Been gone. Yeah.
Yeah, they're in Canada. Yeah.
Yeah. And it makes sense. I told you I'm going to do some hunting this summer. Look around at some alternative living arrangements because it's just gotten to the point where when we can't even have fact-based arguments, right? I mean, why bother? And especially here in the South, people are just even more emboldened. As a matter of this is how bad it is down here. There is a story circulating online that a couple of Klansmen went into the hood in Atlanta, which I don't know where that could be, and didn't make it out. They got unalived, right? But nobody can find any reports of anybody being, taken out.
Missing.
Yeah. And so, this is what we've come to, right? And there are people out there on YouTube doing full blown, 45. I found myself watching. I said, why am I watching this? Does this make any sense? I can't find any of this on any of the local news channels. Like, certainly this would have been reported. And then, of course, as soon as I said that to myself as I'm on my iPad Googling, someone pops up and says, well, maybe they're keeping it from the media because they don't want, any kind of backlash or people from, the outskirts of town coming back to get payback. I was like, oh my God, now we're making up conspiracy theories on the run, about the Klan visiting Atlanta. And you remember now, and I bring
Well,
that
wait,
up.
would this have been someone in full Klan regalia just
Yeah,
trooping
they said,
into a black neighborhood and unarmed to just walking down the street?
they
Yeah,
were there.
I don't know. I mean, that story sounds fishy to me, and no one has a video. No one has a video out. No one took out their phone. They just got killed in the middle of the street, and their
That's
families aren't looking. Families aren't looking for them.
and
Yeah,
making
yeah.
all
I
kinds of noise.
mean, I think the noise level, you know,
Right,
there is a downside to a lot of. It is a downside to everyone being a media person, right? Like
right, right.
it's hard to trust.
And the thing about it is they were supposed to have on the Klan regalia. So that would have made it.
That's a little. Yeah, that's a little.
Somebody would have taken out their phone and had the
Why wear Klan regalia? You don't have to. You can just
not
you could
anymore.
just troop down the street now and just like have your
Just
machine gun with your silencer on it over your back, ready to gun people down. Like you could just burn crosses right in the middle of the day. Who's going to stop you?
yeah.
Now
And
the
we've
only
already
people
had
wearing
that in Atlanta.
only people wearing masks are ICE.
Right. And we've already had that kind of hate crime in Atlanta with the massage parlor shootings. So, Brock, it's sad. But, the fact that people are smart people, right? Accomplished people are willing to get up and go and leave America because of the political climate, the violence. There are travel warnings when you come to America from other countries. They warn you about the violence here. Right. So, and we don't have any prospect of it getting better. As a matter of fact, most people think it's going to get worse. And the only way it really can get better, we talked about this a little bit, was right through revolution, right? Or, right, we vote our way out of it, but the American electorate is so iffy. Who wants to rely on that?
And it's so far away.
Right. Right.
I remember when Hervé told us it was going to have to all burn to the ground before anyone, people got motivated to get out there.
Right.
So, will this budget be enough of a galvanizer? I would argue no, because complacent white America is not going to feel it, right? They're not going to worry about the Medicaid cuts. A handful will say, their parents are coming off of it. There'll be some grumbling, but I doubt it'll be enough. I don't think it's a visceral enough event. There's no martyrdom here. There's no, video of something happening that just triggers like massive anger.
Like George Floyd.
Sadly, shooting of two young Jewish people out in DC. Not you know, no one hit the streets today, right? It didn't trigger anything because it, once again, it was a compartmentalized event. So it was all these like, oh, that's the Jewish community. So it's all this death by 1,000 cuts and nothing that's really just not generating the anger.
Right.
So, I mean, I see on December 6th, there's actually going to be a veterans march in DC, which I find
Oh,
interesting because that's 8 days before June 6th. That's D Day, because that's 8 days before June 14th, when, in theory, there's going to be a wave of people on the streets all over the country, although we will continue to argue that most of those people should just go to DC and shut down the military parade, and
okay.
let's have a real conflict. Let's have a real showdown. Let's have a real show of power, not just a show of what disillusionment.
Right. 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 Because Trump doesn't care about protests in Pocatello, right? He could give a damn what people are
About
saying in
Yeah,
Boise.
he doesn't care about disillusionment. He doesn't care if
Care
people are
about
grumbling. Like he doesn't even notice it.
You can protest all you want in Las Cruces, right? He doesn't give a shit. So, if we go there and we're able to shut down that damn parade, though, he'll be, beside himself. Just like he was during the George Floyd protest when he held the Bible upside down and had to get, the military to come out there and make a way for him so he could come out there and try to, flex his little muscle. But
Yeah, we'll all be Antifa, right? I'll create some, fictional Antifa group that's out there. But you know what? We will be Antifa. True
right.
Antifa, anti-fascist, right?
That's
So
right.
yeah, it would be an Antifa movement. And yeah, he would want us all investigated, right? All lock them all up, investigate them all. They're all treasonous.
Terrorists.
He'd probably argue for everyone to be shot. Hey, maybe he might invoke martial law that day. Like he's a psychopath in mental decline. You don't know how far he would be willing to go,
Right.
and we got to push his buttons.
No doubt. No doubt. All right. That's going to be the last word for us today, my friend. Let's keep the pressure on tomorrow, heading into the weekend. Let's remind people that June 14th is getting closer by the day. Tick tock, party people. Tell your friends about the podcast. You can find us on YouTube each and every day right here. Subscribe, like, and share it with a friend. Have a great day. Brock, always a pleasure, my
All
friend.
right, Mark. Take care. Talk to you tomorrow.
Yes, sir.